Hi everyone, it's Marianne. Welcome to my Wasteless Life. In this video, let's talk about the care and propagation of Monstera Siltepecana. Thank you so much for joining me today, and if you're new, this is my Wasteless Life, where I take you along my plant and sustainable lifestyle journey and share with you some of my tips and tricks along the way. And if this is your first time watching me, I'm currently doing a Monstera series this month, and if you haven't seen it yet, go check out my video on the popular varieties of the Monstera plant and what's in my collection. And I'm also doing specific care and propagation guides for the Monstera plants that I do have in my collection, and I already did one for the Monstera adansonii, and today is with the Monstera siltepecana, and I have a couple more of those coming up. So if you're not subscribed yet, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. This is my Monstera siltepecana. It wasn't always like this when I first got it. It was actually a huge 8-inch pot that I got from Lowe's, and it was a pure coincidence that I got it at Lowe's early 2020. I wasn't even sure what I got, honestly. I had to ask Instagram for help to help me ID the plant, and what I got was a Monstera siltepecana. And back then I wasn't really interested in having a huge basket of a Monstera siltepecana, and also almost immediately I was experiencing yellowing with my Monstera siltepecana like I did with my Monstera adansonii, and I couldn't really figure out what was wrong with it. Since it's such a big pot and it was a little bit root bound, I decided to break it apart into smaller plants, but the yellowing still continued even if I already break it up into smaller plants. And what I did then is I converted one of my Monstera siltepecana into Leica, and if you've seen my Monstera adansonii care video, switching it to Leica is one of the things that really helps stop the yellowing in my Monstera adansonii. So I thought it would work the same if I tried it out for my Monstera siltepecana. But this is my Monstera siltepecana that I also converted in Leica. I took it out of the soil, cleaned it, let it propagate in water for I think a day or two, maybe even up to a week before I transferred it in to Leica. And this is what it looks right now. It looks really healthy, but this one actually suffered root rot while it was in Leica. Since I was still seeing some yellowing, not a lot, but some yellowing, I just decided to check on the roots, and I saw a lot of root rot. And I'm going to insert a photo right here of the roots when it was suffering from root rot, and that was like the most root rot I experienced in a plant. So what I did then is I just cut off the roots that were rotting, repotted it in Leica, and so far so good. It's been doing really well, and hopefully it continues to stay that way. This plant did not stay that way. This eventually died. It just keeps on yellowing and keeps getting root rot in Leica, and eventually I had to save what I can and propagate what I could, but this plant did not survive being in Leica, and I lost all that trails. So I was kind of disappointed that Leica didn't work out for my Monstera siltepecana. So after I repotted it into smaller pots, I actually sold the rest of the Monstera siltepecana that I already had. So I was left with probably 2 or 3 of them. The one in Leica, as mentioned, died out. So basically I only had 2 4-inch pots left, and the other 4-inch pot I did sell it or trade it out earlier this year for a variegated string of pearls. So this is all the Monstera siltepecana I have left, and if you've seen my struggling plants video, I've also mentioned that I was struggling with this plant because it also started yellowing again. And with my Monstera siltepecana, yellowing was also a big issue aside from root rot. And since being in soil doesn't work for it, being in Leica doesn't work for it, I tried converting it into sphagnum moss, and that's what worked for my Monstera siltepecana. Propagated and rehab really well in sphagnum moss, and I just continue to keep it in sphagnum moss as it continues to grow, and I don't think I plan on switching it out to any other medium anytime soon. And so when it comes to the light requirements for Monstera siltepecana, I currently do have it inside my IKEA greenhouse cabinet because they do love humidity. But when I was propagating it downstairs, it was right next to a south-facing window next to a humidifier. So I would really encourage you to give your Monstera siltepecana a lot of humidity if you're experiencing a lot of issues with it. And another issue that I experienced with the Monstera siltepecana is pests. This one for me is a pest magnet, at least when it comes to fungus gnats. I haven't had any other pest infestation with my Monstera siltepecana, but this was patient 0 for my biggest fungus gnat infestation yet. So my solution to that was really just to use sticky traps and also dousing the sphagnum moss, or the medium is currently in, with hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is currently my best friend right now. I use it for everything from propagation to trying to clear out pests in soil, just everything. So I did douse it with hydrogen peroxide, and that seemed to solve the problem right now. It no longer has fungus gnats. And when it comes to yellowing, it still does yellow quite a bit. Like over here, you can see another yellowing leaf, and I just recently watered it. So when it comes to yellowing leaves in Monstera siltepecana, I completely stopped stressing over it. Because the good thing about the Monstera siltepecana is, yes, it has issues, but it also bounced back from those issues pretty quickly. So whenever this one has any yellowing or root rot, I don't panic too much, unlike with my other plants, because as long as I act immediately or take the proper recourse, like if it's having root rot, cut off all the rotting roots. If it has fungus gnats, treat the fungus gnat situation. Yellowing leaves, if does it have enough humidity, etc., it will bounce back and it would grow into something like this. Because this one, when it was struggling, it was probably only 3 or 4 leaves left, but now look at it, it has a lot of new growth coming in and it's becoming a full plant again. So when it comes to watering, I do have this in sphagnum moss. It does prefer to be completely dried out, like the sphagnum moss be bone dry, before I actually water it again. And when I do water it, because this is in sphagnum moss, I try not to over soak it or put too much water when I do water it. If possible, I bottom water it so that it could only absorb the right amount of water. And after I water it, I make sure it drains out completely, and I even squeeze the pot for any excess water just to make sure that it doesn't have excess moisture in it, because this one is also in a plastic pot, so it won't lead to root rot, because Monstera siltepecana is very prone to root rot, at least in my experience. And when it comes to propagation of the Monstera siltepecana, as mentioned, what worked best is propagating it in sphagnum moss. You can try water propagation, since that is the easiest method for anyone to do, but for me, I had the best success in propagating it in sphagnum moss. And just like propagating any plant in sphagnum moss, just make sure that the sphagnum moss is not overly saturated and it's not overly compact, because you want oxygen flow and also space for the roots to grow in the sphagnum moss. And I do prefer my Monstera siltepecana to become a trailing plant. Others like to give it something to climb on, like a moss bow, and you can do that too. And eventually you might encourage it to actually fenestrate or produce holes or split leaves. But in my experience, or at least what I've seen in many plant parent experience, it's quite hard to get this to mature when you get them as a juvenile plant, unless you really have great conditions for the plant. You have a greenhouse or a grow tent or something for it to actually mature and grow those split leaves. But for ordinary plant parents like me, like us, you probably will not get it to fenestrate or have split leaves in just an indoor setting and having it as a trailing plant. And those are my care tips and propagation hacks for the Monstera siltepecana. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. And if you have additional tips and tricks for the Monstera siltepecana, also please share them in the comments. I would love to read them and learn from you. And again, I do have an entire Monstera series going on this month. I would have the links down in the description the moment they're up, so please do check them out. And again, thank you so much for watching. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, I hope you subscribe. I come up with houseplants and sustainable lifestyle videos every week. And if you haven't yet, go check out my videos up here until my next one. But until then, I see you, I appreciate you, take care of yourself and each other, and have a plentiful day. Bye!